Thank you. We will now have the book launch of Mr. Hindol Sengupta, Sing, Dance and Lead. Let's sit back and enjoy a short movie that will be played on the book.
And inspiration for leadership. Usually, we look to icons in the West. But what about the great teachings of our gurus and masters accumulated over thousands of years in India's ancient civilization? Why can't we dig deep into these stories for lessons in leadership? Srila Prabhupada was not only a highly revered guru of the Gaudiya Vaishnavite tradition, he was also a masterclass in institution building.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Within only a decade, he built an organization that had 108 centers in different locations around the world. This is something that the best entrepreneurs and conglomerates would struggle to achieve. The founder of ISKCON is known around the world as a great spiritual leader, but he has never been studied as an institution builder, a spiritual entrepreneur. This gap fills Sing, Dance and Lead. For the very first time, Sing, Dance and Lead helps us understand Srila Prabhupada as one of the world's greatest spiritual entrepreneurs, who left behind an astonishing legacy of rapid, sustainable growth and institution building. Packed with unique insights, Sing, Dance and Lead seamlessly brings together some of the best theories of leadership in the world and shows how these could acquire new, enlightened dimensions in the spiritual light of Srila Prabhupada.
Businessman goes everywhere. It is not that he has to find out particular customer in a particular place. He goes everywhere. Similarly, we go everywhere. If anyone is intelligent, if he is needed, he can come to Krishna consciousness. That's all.
This unique book encourages us to think about the real purpose and destination of all leadership. Why do we want to be a leader? For whom? And for what purpose? It opens a whole new dimension to the usual leadership theorizing and takes it to an absolutely new dimension and level. Sing, Dance and Lead gives a new perspective to servant leadership. and introduces unique concepts like total bhakti management to create a whole new universe of leadership learning through Srila Prabhupada's life and teachings. Sing, Dance and Lead by Professor Dr. Hindol Sengupta, India's most celebrated historian of religion and author of 12 previous books, unveils Prabhupada's revolutionary leadership.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
It's a call to awaken your soul's leadership potential. Claim your copy today at bookstores or Amazon. Let Prabhupada's wisdom inspire you to lead with divine purpose.
Namaste, Namaskara. Welcome Hindol. It's wonderful to be reconnecting with you in Mysuru as part of your second book in the series of Sing, Dance, Pray and Lead. A warm welcome to Chanchalapathi ji, to Mysuru and to this session. Just off the bat, to sort of set the context for the book. And this is a question that perhaps both of you can chip in. When Prabhupada ji set foot in the United States, 1965, if I presume right, the counterculture was on its decline. The world that had seen the Beatles, had seen a John Lennon, and had been disillusioned by the miracle making, by the yogi flying and the frog hopping, and that view of what spirituality and faith, that view of what faith can offer citizens of the world. And so in this scenario, Prabhupada ji entered America, but the world that was then is a very different world that is now. So and the notions of leadership itself has changed drastically. I'm sure you'll agree with that. The notions of who is a leader, what can he offer his followers, and the notion of what is leading itself. And Hindol, you take a very, very broad-based approach to the various theories of leadership, which we'll get to in a minute. But the world that we live in today, the world where technology is at once flattening maps and geographies and is also creating inequalities of a very different kind than when Prabhupada ji set his foot in America, in this world of exponential technologies and in a world where Gen Zs and the millennials are looking for religious solutions outside of the canons of institutionalized religion. In this world, how is the ISKCON movement taking cognizance of these changes? And in the context of this book also, how are you viewing this leading into the future in this context?
I think Prabhuji should first answer the question on ISKCON, and then I will mention a few things. Yeah, very true. The times in 1965, when there was no mobile phone, internet, social media, and the time that we are in now is very, very significantly different. And I do not disagree with you that ideas of leadership and things have changed. But there are a few things which have not changed. Leadership is about connecting and influencing and leading people for a more meaningful, enriching life experience. So in that sense, there are always leaders in the society and people who are led. And so as leaders who have an opportunity and an ability to influence large number of people, they have a certain responsibility. Now, when it comes to leadership, we have seen in the world, in our country, around the world, in different domains, whether it's politics, business, science, academia, etc. Sometimes the lower qualities of a human being overpower and the higher sublime purpose, and hence that leadership position is misutilized and not always the very best standards of leadership have been seen. So Srila Prabhupada's principles, the principles that he taught, were addressing some of these natural human instincts and to rein control over them so that the leader can be more responsible and truly deliver good things to people who follow him or her. So in that sense, the need for these, you use the word religious. Well, I may also continue to use your word religious, but I would think one of the important contributions of Srila Prabhupada was he taught Vedic literatures like the Gita, the Upanishads, the Bhagavatam, and many of these Vedic literatures, not only within a religious framework, but even beyond a religious framework, shall we say, a spiritual framework and a spiritual perspective, answering very fundamental questions and finding very fundamental purpose to human life. And so when he brought those principles and how those understanding and appreciation of those principles can bring out genuinely human and sublime qualities in a person, and hence a person in leadership position can perform better and create a much more meaningful, purposeful impact on the people. So I think these things are very relevant and very, very much important even to this day.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's indeed true that leadership and leading has to first begin with the leadership theory, if you will, has to begin with the leader as a person. And it's not just a product. It also emerges as part of a process of leading, but the leadership and the leading has to first begin with an inner insight for the leader himself. So that like Arjuna, he is able to read reality properly and ask the right questions when the dharma sankata emerges. So, Hindol, even in the video, we sort of premise all of our Indian theories on leadership with the lament, if you will permit me, that Western scholarship has always been like the metaphor of blind men looking and feeling and perceiving an elephant, right? When we talk about Greenleaf's theory or the theory of transformative leadership or servant leadership, the Indian scholars always say that they only have a part of the puzzle. They don't have the holistic view. They're looking at leaders as servant leaders, as transformative leaders. They tend to bracket and fracture and fragment leadership into various categories. But in many ways, do you feel that that fragmentation also may lead to a perception of the whole? It's useful because you've used it in your book as well. But in the leadership model and journey of Prabhupada ji, does a canon emerge? Does an indigenous bottoms-up canon of leadership theory emerge as part of this book?
Thank you very much. Namaskara. I've learned that, I have read so much about your beautiful city from various literature. I always wanted to come here. I have been trying to coordinate with Shubhaji for a long time to come here. I'm finally here. Thank you very much. It is all because of the warmth of your festival, of your great city. It looks beautiful. I am hoping, I always say, when I go to the Puri Literature Festival, I always say, the festival is one part of the story, but I've really come to see Lord Jagannath. So at your wonderful festival, your festival is one part of the story, but I've really come to take blessings from Ma Chamundeshwari. That is my real intention, to go and do darshan of Ma Chamundeshwari. But I want to answer your question in two levels, Deepti. Thank you very much for your question. By the way, this was the first launch. The book is just out. This was the first launch of Sing, Dance and Lead, and all the more memorable, Mysore, for that. Thank you very much. Thank you. So one part of the answer is at an instrumental level, and allow me to explain what I mean by that. As I wrote in the book, when I used to study at Columbia Business School, a lot of the way we were taught were via case studies. The US is famous for teaching using the case study methodology. Now, all these case studies were all almost universally from a Western perspective, using Western examples. And it occurred to me that India has a vast tradition and legacy and civilization replete with leadership examples, but we have somewhere failed to convert that knowledge into practical, applicable lessons that anybody can use. I sometimes feel when we use the word canonize, it's a very important word, but it shouldn't distance us. What happens with our knowledge in our country is everything is so canonized that it never seems to reach millions of people who might be helped by it. And I feel that there is a real need for us now to look at our own tradition, find examples. You mentioned servant leadership, so I want to delve more into this example. So there is this leadership principle called servant leadership. There's a man called Greenleaf, and you can read all about it if you Google it. And this is a very important theory. A lot of people follow this theory. And servant leadership is actually very simple. It basically says that the best leaders consider themselves to be of service to their customers, to their clients, to the people they're interacting with, and so on and so forth. So there's a certain humility, innate sort of a sense of respect, and so on and so forth. But if you look at the Gaudiya Vaishnavite tradition, which stretches all the way up to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you see, today also every monk of this tradition is called Prabhu. The reason they're called Prabhu is because they are instilled with this belief that their life is devoted to being the servants of Sri Krishna, and therefore also their Guru, and therefore humanity at large. Now, I feel this is such a beautiful and old tradition in India. It's just that we have never delved deeper into it to try and understand it better. It's there in our tradition. People are using it. But we haven't thought hard about it and unpacked it to try and understand what are the motivations, what are the psychologies, what are the devotional aspects of this, which we can apply in our day-to-day life. And if I were to zoom out, that's the instrumental part. But if I were to take a bigger picture, I teach international relations at the O.P. Jindal Global University outside Delhi in a place called Sonipat. And we talk about this in IR also. You see, the problem with a lot of Western work is that it's deeply anthropocentric. By which I mean that everything, all their work is based on one simple principle, which is actually against everything that our Indian tradition has. It is with the principle that man is at the top, everything else is under man, and man must exploit, and by man I mean human beings. Everything is there for human beings to exploit. Whereas we have exactly the different theory. We say that human beings are one more part of a whole existence that must be revered. Today there are some people, for instance, this professor in Cambridge, who's saying rivers have identity. But we knew rivers had identity 5,000 years ago. It's just that we never wrote books about this subject, we never wrote research papers about this subject, we never put it in this manner, right? So we have a deeply non-anthropocentric way of looking at life. We never say that human beings must exploit everything, the earth, the water, the sky, everything, animals, everything is there only for our consumption. Any canonical text or any text that you find in Hinduism will say that, you know, I was giving a lecture outside India and I was saying, if you look at Indian mantras, even if you take the simplest that everybody knows, take the Shanti mantra. You know, you go to any yoga class today in California, they're saying the Shanti mantra. But are they really understanding the Shanti mantra? Because the most important thing there is peace for who? Peace for everyone. They don't say peace only for human beings and let human beings exploit everything else and only human beings should be at peace. It is for everything. The entire creation must be at peace. Therefore, we understand, you know, when I used to, in my earlier life as a business journalist, when we used to talk about a triple barrel bottom line, that you must think about environment also and society also and so on and so forth. It is the West trying to understand non-anthropocentric behavior, because there even why is capitalism in crisis today? Because of this anthropocentric idea that corporations only must look at their profit and nothing else. Everything else is to be exploited. Whereas if you read Srila Prabhupada, there is a deep innate sense that everything that has been created is the creation of Krishna. And therefore, how can I say only I will exploit everything, but forget the animals, forget the trees, forget the waters, forget the skies, forget even other human beings, right? There is an innate universalism in this teaching. And this universalism lies at the very core of our understanding of the universe. And the moment you understand that, a lot of what we call sustainability makes sense. But what we do, and we are doing even today, is we will learn all these concepts one day, and this is why some of us are working. When somebody from America will write this in a book, we will learn to pick up that book, we will read that, and then we will come to India and tell other people that look how amazing the Americans are. I mean, last time I was in New York, somebody was giving me this long lecture about how biohacking is a wonderful idea. And I wanted to know, what is biohacking? No, basically you fast on such days and you fast for a long time. Your entire system is rejuvenated. I'm like, do you know, I do Bhagavad Gita classes from a guru every Saturday from Chanchalapathi Prabhu, who also fasts. He's been fasting for 45 years in a particular way in his tradition. It's just that he never said, oh my God, this is Silicon Valley biohacking. If he did, you know, maybe he could have created $1 billion corporation just on that. But I'm just giving you, this is a funny anecdote to say, all of these things, some other person told me that somebody has written, a magic hour book. What is magic hour? You basically wake up at 3:30 in the morning and amazing, it's a great time for work and all CEOs should apply it. And the Indians are coming in giving this gyan to themselves. Look at the self-defeating cycle that we are caught in. If the same thing would have been told to you by your neighborhood guru or priest or elder, that Brahma Muhurtam is a good thing, if you can wake up, your system cleanses, you focus better, you would have said, this is all rubbish, this is all old stuff, I don't need to hear this. So we are stuck in our world as Indians in a very self-defeating loop. And with the blessings of elders and gurus, some of us are trying to break out of that self-defeating loop. To say that I am not disputing the West has a lot of amazing things. I am not taking away anything from that. But I am saying there are a lot of amazing things in our culture also. And we have done a bad job of presenting it, right? We have never presented it. Think about it. I mentioned this to a CEO friend of mine. You say, okay, global corporations, amazing. This guy did this, that guy did this. How was an Indian man who had never stepped out of India, Srila Prabhupada, at the age where most people retire, suddenly took a ship and went to America and 10 years built 100 temples around the world? Is this not an example of institution building? Will you not ask the question, how did he raise finances? How did he deploy them? Will you not see this through the lens of efficient use of capital? But because it's Srila Prabhupada, we never ask this question. We're like, oh, some sadhu did something, whatever, what do I care? Right? But if this would have been presented in a different way, this would have become a case study. They would have said, oh, he raised capital in this manner. Some equation would come out saying efficient deployment of capital, and everybody would be spouting it. So I just feel we have a lot of such tradition. We really need to break out from this self-defeating loop and really understand what we have without denying that others also have good things, no problem. But we also have a lot of interesting ideas in our culture. We have always failed to understand them. And some of us are making a humble attempt with the help of all of you to try and present it.
Thank you so much. Yes. Isn't there anecdotal sort of stories of how Greenleaf actually traveled to India to propound the servant leadership model? But as you said, it's been around. In fact, the Travancore Maharajas call themselves Padmanabha Dasas. Their crown is the Padukas of Padmanabha. And hence the idea of asserting divine right to rule a piece of land has also looked at servant leadership models in the past. And so it's fascinating that you actually deal with that in your chapter, the Prabhu principle, where positioning the leader as a servant to a higher cause actually flattens the hierarchical, so that we are creating organizational structures which are more horizontal rather than tops down. Would you want to say something about, because that's a cornerstone of your book?
No, absolutely.
In so many ways.
We talk so much about egalitarianism these days, right? And many Western models of egalitarian have emerged, including open source office, which is probably the worst thing that anybody can do as far as efficiency is concerned. However, and I'm so glad Deepti ji mentioned this example. Of course, the Padmanabha Swami example is a very important one, but also at Jagannath Puri, the Rath Yatra begins with the ruler cleaning the streets because he is really a servant to the Lord of the universe. Jagannath means Lord of the universe, right? This positioning, this idea that at the end of the day, we are all one because we are all devoted to a higher cause. You will find again and again, we just gave you 2 examples. There would be so many examples that maybe we also don't know. Actually, the problem is we have the same problem with spirituality and ideas in our country as we do with history. We have so much of it that we always fail to really take care of it. When you have excess of anything, you refuse to value it, right? We have so much. Look at while coming into Mysore, I was thinking of the history of Mysore. And I thought, and then I also got, it became too much for me also. I was like, my God, the amount of history this place has, right? So when you have so much of it in one tiny corner, imagine how much the whole country has, right? So therefore, I think this, again, egalitarianism is very embedded in everything. We are egalitarian even about, while coming here, I was watching this video of this famous crocodile, since you mentioned Padmanabha Swami, who only used to eat prasadam. And he supposedly lived for a long, long, long time and never harmed anyone. What a beautiful story. This story, had it occurred in America, there would have at least been $1 billion film made by Disney on this. And the maximum number of revenue would have come from Indians going to watch it. But because it's India, nobody has made a film about it. So, and we can talk all day, all night. I mean, all of you have such examples in your mind that you can share. And there will be n number of examples. I just feel we should all now join hands to bring out these examples. And one of the biggest examples, I just did a podcast, I mentioned this. Everybody tells me, long before actually I met His Grace and started writing Sing, Dance and Pray, I knew about Akshay Patra. Right? Everybody talked about Akshay Patra, amazing, at that time I think 2 billion meals, going up to 3 billion meals and so on and so forth. But very few people recognize, in fact, I am ashamed to say very few people even understand where the name Akshay Patra comes from. You ask them why is it Akshay Patra, they won't be able to tell you. Then very few people understand that Akshay Patra, the bowl that never gets over, so to speak, became this massive organization with now I think 4 billion meals. I don't even know what is the last count. Because it was inspired by Srila Prabhupada. Because Srila Prabhupada said, and look at the egalitarianism. Here is an elderly monk who looks out of a window, sees children scavenging for food. Tears come to his eyes and he says, if we are truly all the children of God, how is it possible that I am getting food and another child of God is not getting food? This is not possible. And gives instructions that within a 10-kilometer radius of any establishment that I have created, no one will go hungry. That is the inspiration for Akshay Patra. But you ask most people who have heard of Akshay Patra, they cannot tell you the story. And I think it's a great shame because it is directly inspired by the living memory of instructions of a great guru. It's direct, I mean, there is no confusion about it. And yet, so many people don't know this, even though they of course know Akshay Patra and all the awards it has won and the great work it does. So I think there is so much that we need to explain to people so that the dots join, so to speak.
Hindol, and also as written in the introduction, the way in which Akshay Patra Foundation has actually cracked the way in which it has worked with the governmental setup. That in itself is a fascinating case study for governance and interactions between the governing bodies and non-governmental organizations and how they can actually come together, talk together and create change. That's a fascinating thing. Chanchalapathi ji, if I may ask, in the context of this book and your own leadership, how India's largest export to the world back then and now has been spiritual knowledge. It's always been India's largest export, and it has been a part of India's soft power and cultural diplomacy, which we are now coming into cognizance of as a country. So how does this book and how do you envision this book changing the larger conversation? But in the geopolitical scenarios, spirituality and religion or interfaith diplomacy, none of these actually feature in the larger, conversations of India's, leveraging India's presence in the rest of the world. So how do you wish that this book feature and change the larger conversation on India's soft power into the world?
Yeah, very true. India's biggest export has been and should be spirituality. Somebody in Delhi who was involved in making International Yoga Day, they were telling us, they were inviting us as an institution. We have quite successfully popularized yoga around the world, and our Prime Minister is also been a great advocate of that. And they were telling us, today yoga has come to, when you say yoga, what comes to someone's mind, especially in the West, is some asanas and physical postures and exercises, which is definitely an important part of yoga, but that's not everything. There are so many more aspects of yoga, and not properly understood, not properly articulated, as Hindol was mentioning. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita a very interesting definition of yoga. He says, yoga is the science of one's relation with the Supreme. So, actually, in this, Prabhupada was very expert in articulating some of the very profound spiritual truths in very simple language. You see, Prabhupada used the word yoga as a science of one's relation, meaning our relation with the Supreme is a science, in the sense it is not an imagination, it is not just some belief, it is not some sentiment. Just like water is made of hydrogen and oxygen mixed in a certain proportion, is science. In the same way, each one of us have a relation with the Supreme. Just like each one of us have a relation with our father and mother. It is undeniable. It is not a belief. It is just a sentiment that you are carrying. Nobody will accept that. We all have a relation. We have our father and mother, and we have a relation with them. This is a fact. In the same way, Srila Prabhupada presented that yoga means that it is a science of one's relation with the Supreme. So we are there, and there is a Supreme, and there is a relationship, and it is a science, and this is something to be discovered and understood and appreciated and experienced. So like this, Srila Prabhupada went about presenting these things, and what Dr. Hindol Sengupta has done is that he's been studying Prabhupada's life from various aspects. His first book was called Sing, Dance and Pray, where he basically captured the life story with a lot of historical context and circumstances that led to Prabhupada to do different things. So I think in this way, if our culture, our cultural heritage, and the wisdom that is embodied in our culture and heritage, if it is presented in more contemporary idiom and vocabulary, and which people are able to connect with, Gen Z and millennials, and I think there is a great opportunity, and this is something that has to be done. More people have to do this, and it's going to benefit the whole world. And this is an export, not for material gain, not for commercial gain, but with single intent, how to benefit people. Once I'll share with you one anecdote. Prabhupada was in London once. And so there was a grand reception for him, and there were some media people. And someone came forward and stuck a mic in front of him and asked the question, "Why have you come to London?" And so Srila Prabhupada said, "You ruled our country for a fairly long time, and you took away a lot of things from our country, lot of wealth. But you missed taking one important wealth from our country, and I have come to give you that."
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I think at the end of the introduction, there's this very telling line where I think Prabhupada ji reports to Sumati Morarji that the people of America want Krishna, they just don't know it. because we haven't shown them Krishna. And in the light of what Hindol also said, it's a matter of presenting it. It's a matter of taking the onus and leading with and leveraging what India's heritage and intellectual traditions have always had to say. So leading up to this point, in your book, you mentioned this concept of what could be called spiritual leapfrogging, and taking Peter Thiel's idea that it's better to innovate and introduce a new idea rather than incrementally develop older ideas. And that's a radical thought given that he was actually positioning himself as an ambassador, as a torchbearer of ancient Indian traditions. So it must have taken something for him to actually come to that breakthrough moment. So can you just speak about that?
No, absolutely. You see, when I was writing about Srila Prabhupada from a historical perspective in Sing, Dance and Pray, I thought a lot about this, that obviously there had been people from India, great gurus who had made a mark in the West. And most of them were from what could be called the broad Advaita Vedanta tradition. Of course, you can talk about Swami Vivekananda and so on and so forth. But Srila Prabhupada didn't arrive and do an incremental expansion of that. He was introducing an entirely different thing, as it were, right? And I thought a lot to myself while writing that book, what would those people in New York would have thought? Because many of them were hippies, they were part of this counterculture movement, as you were just saying. They had been protesting against the Vietnam War and so on and so forth. And they basically, on Upper East Side, met this elderly Indian monk in clothes that they had never seen really before. And some of them knew because, they were connected to this whole, hippie movement. Some of them knew a little bit about yoga and this and. But here was this man who was basically had a little stage, for the lack of a better word, and he had deities on them, and there were like these incense sticks, and he was chanting mantras, and he was praying. It would have seemed really something out of the world for many of them, right? They had never seen something like this before. There was nothing in their culture that could have prepared them for this. I later on thought, in the middle of, in a time when there used to be these massive music festivals in California and San Francisco, Srila Prabhupada brought the Rath Yatra. Now, I thought to myself, and in Srila Prabhupada's writings also you find that when they went and asked the municipality and the police give us permission, they said, what do you want? They said, we want to create these huge towering, blocks of wood which will go up like a tower, but they will not be stable. They will not be on a vehicle, and we want to go down your street. I mean, think about it, what would those men and women, what would they have thought? I mean, this was obviously, this must have sounded completely out of the world to them. They had no context to any of this. And yet, because it was like you're saying 0 to 1, so to speak, because it was such a leap of faith, it was such a big hit, because no one had ever seen something like this before. A Rath Yatra in the middle of San Francisco. Who would have believed it until it happened, right? It's that old principle, right, which says that essentially any leap of imagination or technology is indistinguishable from magic. Because magic is something that you see and you think, and you don't understand why it's happening, right? It would have seemed like that. I mean, here were these tonsured men and women dancing in the middle of San Francisco, singing songs with words that the general population couldn't understand, with these huge towering ruts where, there was Srila Prabhupada on top throwing flowers and garlands. And you see there are these videos also on YouTube you can find. It's astounding. You can see the impact. It was almost like, see, this is what I say. We always think that the West can do great theatrical things that would amaze us. But here was an Indian elderly man doing dramatic theatrical things that amazed the West. Here was America, which was the world's most powerful soft power civilization which could do, had Walt Disney and so on and so forth, these amazing things. But here was this Indian sadhu who was doing things on their streets that amazed them. I found this video, which actually so many people who read the book mentioned this to me, of this, during that time, there used to be this conversation between the quote-unquote right wing and the left wing about the Vietnam War. So in one of these conversations, there is this beatnik poet, Allen Ginsberg, and there is this other sort of conservative thinker, both of them young. And they're having this furious on television, this debate about the Vietnam War. Should it happen? Shouldn't it happen? Should America be involved? All kinds of things. Until at some point, and this beatnik poet had become a devotee of Srila Prabhupada, he pulls out a little harmonium, and this is happening on American television, from under the chair, and says, you're not understanding what I'm talking about, so maybe if I sing it, you will understand it. And he starts singing Hare Krishna. And you can see the face of the other guys, like he's been, he's gobsmacked, as we would say. So I'm saying, like, this is the power of what you're talking about, the leap of imagination, right? Belief that if you present something really powerful, which is novel and yet very new, people would be moved by it. And I think that's exactly what happened, right?
And more importantly, sing, dance, and pray. Sing, dance, and lead, right? The idea, up until then, the hippie movement and the counterculture said that you need an intoxicant from the outside to actually levitate you into exalted states of consciousness. Prabhupada ji said, you've got the apparatus right here. It's your body. It's the high of Krishna, which can actually lead you to the same destination, the same neurological ecstasy that perhaps ecstasy gives you, ecstasy, the drug. And so this in itself, right, the idea of using your body, your deha, as a vehicle for inner transformation.
So this is why I always say, if Srila Prabhupada would have been alive today, he would have many social media followers. Because he was very, very clever with his quip. He would have many millions of social media followers. People are impressed by Shashi Tharoor's quips. Let me tell you, Srila Prabhupada was much better. So, because think about it, one would think an elderly Indian sadhu would be scared. Oh my God, these drug addicts, and what are they doing? But look at the cleverness of the man to say, okay, well, you're talking about being high. Well, there is no greater high that you could ever experience in your life than really being face to face with the Godhead, right? What could be greater than really going towards God? Right? But what a clever quip. I always think that it is such a clever, smart line, right? So yeah, he would have many social media followers, I think, had he been around today.
Chanchalapathi ji, could you sort of, drawing from the transformative leadership vignettes that have been presented in the book, it's been roughly 50 years since the passing away of Prabhupada ji, and unlike other organizations, ISKCON has held its own and shows as an organizational, in an organizational dynamic, there has been a greater resilience to the ISKCON movement as opposed to other social, spiritual or spiritual religious movements. So how do you account for the transformative leadership skills and verticals that Prabhupada ji left within the organizations that account for this resilience of the ISKCON movement here in India and globally as well?
Yeah. Earlier in your question, you mentioned, of course, there is a certain amount of reluctance among people about institutionalized religion, right? And you alluded to that too. Now, Srila Prabhupada saw there is immense advantage of an institution and institution building. Yes, there have been abuses. Mainly those kind of objections come from the institutionalized religion of Christianity, where there have been abuses and things which didn't go well. Nevertheless, Srila Prabhupada saw there are very distinct merits of building an institution in a modern context. Because an institution, when it is well built with the right value system and right practices, right understanding, right processes, which is constantly improving and we use the word purifying the leaders, purifying their hearts, then it can be an institution which is not exploitative, but it is simply oriented to do greater good to the society. So Prabhupada saw that there is immense benefit in an institution. In fact, this principle of Prabhupada using institution to take his mission forward is actually enshrined in one of the principles of surrender, Sharanagati. In the Shastras, in the Vedic literatures, it is mentioned that anukulyasya sankalpaha pratikulyasya varjanam. You accept something that is favorable in the service of the Lord. So Prabhupada saw modern constructs and examples of institutions which are doing well. For instance, our education today in the world is institutionalized. Businesses are institutionalized. Governments are institutionalized. So when Prabhupada saw that there is a certain power of institutions and he wanted to enshrine Krishna's mission in an institutional framework. And he saw that it has the merit and in fact, he did some very revolutionary things from religious institution building. For instance, in our country, religious institutions generally there is a pontiff, there is a spiritual leader, and he appoints a successor and leaves. You see? That is all right. Prabhupada and his guru also foresaw that. It is all right when your institution is small, spanning in a small city or in a few cities. But if it is a global institution, it requires collective intelligence to run and face those complex situations that come about. And so Prabhupada envisioned formation of a governing body, which was actually very revolutionary. In fact, even now I talk to some of the religious leaders in our country, here in India, and they are very surprised about it. Oh, you mean to say Prabhupada did not appoint a successor for himself? Instead, he created a body, a governing body, which will run the institution. In fact, that is what has actually led to the sustenance and expansion of ISKCON in India and around the world. So Prabhupada very expertly took these kind of institutional principles and made sure, and there's one famous statement of Srila Prabhupada, you leaders should ensure politics does not enter this institution. You should keep it pure. And you can keep it pure by having pure practices, and unfailingly you must be absorbed in those practices so that this impurity will not come into the institution. So these are all some of the things that Prabhupada had taught us, and that's how I think the Prabhupada's mission is continuing to expand and will continue to expand.
Wonderful. I think we have time. We have 5 minutes. We have, if it's okay, and Hindol, yeah, we'd love to open the floor for interactions. Please keep your questions brief. We have only 5 minutes. And in the context of today's discussion, please.
My question is to self-defeating. Is it the mean of the what is called as the Advaita philosophy or Dvaita philosophy? If we come to the what is called as this Dvaita philosophy, it becomes I am the God, Aham Brahmasmi. What is your answer?
What's the question? I'm sorry.
When Hindol Sengupta said,
I got it, sir.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't saying this.
Self-defeating.
Sorry?
Self-defeating.
Yes, self-defeating. Before that, I want to say I understood immediately that I'm away from Delhi in this moment, because for the first time I saw that somebody got up with the microphone, then said, no, there was somebody before me and sat down actually. So I realized I'm not in Delhi anymore. I'm in Mysore. This will never happen in Delhi. But self-defeating, yes, sir. So no, I don't mean it like that at all. I only mean it in a very simple way, which is that we have a lot of traditional knowledge. We need to present it better, and if we don't do it, then we are defeating ourselves, our own culture, our own civilization, our own heritage, our own history. So we need to do much better. I just mean it in that simple way.
Yes, please.
I'm Amit Kumar. I work for Schneider Electric and earlier L&T. L&T had a different culture where I will never say my boss. I, like Mr. Nayak, I will always say either Mr. Nayak or Nayak, sir. But when I come to Schneider, Joe Pascal Triquare, who was the MD, I'm supposed to call him, Jay, how are you? And if I say, sir, it is looked at, oh, I don't know what these Indians are about. How do you see this Western culture where, I cannot call my father by his first name, but they call their father by their first name, and that's true in all the multinationals, and I see all the multinational Indians working in multinational trying to copy that.
No, look, there are two ways of looking at this, right? There are two layers, right? I would say at an external layer, at one level, this lack of deference can be something which is empowering. Because in our country, often there's a lot in Hindi, we say ji hazuri. There's a lot of extra, deference to, but it's very transactional. I'll be deferential to somebody so that I can get something out of that person. Instead of that, I think it's much better to show deference when you genuinely feel that respect. And if you feel that respect, you show deference. To an elder, you feel that respect. But often, sometimes we overdo it, and because we want to showcase a particular kind of transaction and so on and so forth. That is, I think, quite false, right? But if you feel genuine respect, sure.
Hare Krishna. Sir, I have a question for you. So this is your second book in this series, Sing, Dance and Lead. Right, so my question is, so why did you choose Prabhupada's story to put it across to people? So why him? There are so many gurus or, so many people who have done a lot of things. So what was it that was special, that stood out in Prabhupada?
Oh, you're asking me? Okay. I thought you were asking
I thought you wrote the book.
I thought the question was for His Grace. I thought the question was to Grace, man. No, look, I mean, I have to say, somebody told me the other day, so I must mention this, that why are you only writing about on the Bengali gurus? Because I wrote about Swami Vivekananda, and now, of course, Srila Prabhupada was Bengali. But that's not true. I wrote about Guru Govind Singh also, I want to point out. So it's not true that I'm only choosing the Bengalis. But look, I mean, obviously, I have some, as I wrote in Sing, Dance and Pray also, I have childhood memories of ISKCON. And, we used to live close to a ISKCON ashram. And I wrote all of that. I mean, these are all my childhood memories. I have deep connection and so on and so forth. So they naturally seemed familiar to me and seemed like something I could engage with and really delve into. But certainly the idea is not to stop. I mean, hopefully, by the grace of God, I'll be able to do more. But even in this journey, there's a lot more that we are doing and we hope to do. So let's see. Hopefully, I'll be back in Mysore with something new again.
I've been asked
No time.
One more, yeah. One more question. Yes, please. Oh, there's already.
Well, you will have to excuse my English. I think after Swami Vivekananda, Srila Prabhupada should have been acclaimed as the spiritual ambassador, but it has not been done in our country. I don't know what the reason is.
No, so
And
that is for
one more thing, just one more thing. About the spiritualism that is transferred from India to the Western. Anand Kumar Swami had written some 100 years back that in the coming decades, Indians would be becoming more and more materialistic, more civilized. And the Westerns would be becoming more and more spiritual. I just want your comment.
No, so about the first part, look, I mean, anyway, at the end of the day, there's a point I always mention that, and it's important for us to register this very clearly, that after Swami Vivekananda, and even actually much more than Swami Vivekananda in terms of having a real physical footprint. Please remember, Srila Prabhupada, because he was able to build 100 temples around the world in 10 years and so on and so forth, there was a real scale and scope that was demonstrated. So there's no running away from that, and that should be acknowledged and really should be underlined. The other thing about Westerners becoming more spiritual and Indians becoming more materialistic, I mean, it's hard to answer that question, right? I mean, India is a very vast country. Of course, Indians have become more materialistic in one sense. But are all Indians like that? I don't know. I mean, I actually think there's a revival of spiritualism in a sense in many pockets of India. And as far as the West is concerned, see, I go back to the earlier point I made, whether it's the West or India, the anthropocentric point of view will only bring us to disaster. If we always think human beings have a special position and we are there to exploit everything, land, water, air, everything is up for us to exploit, and our endless greed to exploit, there will be disaster. Whether it's the West or India, if we recognize that this viewpoint, this anthropocentric viewpoint is not the right way, then perhaps we can reach a more sustainable end.
All right. Thank you very much, Hindol and Chanchalapathi ji, for those very engaging and meaningful conversations. And I hope everyone in this audience will be singing and dancing your way to the author's lounge where he will be signing books. And thank you very much. Over to you.